a man who was so terrified of being wanted for his money that he went to an extreme. It was a flawed plan, Elias, but your heart, your intention, was in the right place. Intentions don't pay rent, Marcus, Elias said bitterly. They don't mend a broken heart. He stopped pacing and stared out the window. I have to fix this. I have to make it right. And so began Elias's first, clumsy attempts at atonement, all of which were filtered through the only lens he knew, the lens of wealth and power. His first instinct was to erase her financial struggles. He sent a well-known art collector, a man whose patronage could make an artist's career overnight, to Imani's stall in the park. He gave the collector a blank check instructing him to buy everything, to praise her work lavishly, to offer her a solo exhibition. It was a perfect plan, he thought. It would give her the recognition she deserved and the financial security she needed, all without his name being directly attached. The collector returned to Elias's office a few hours later, looking flustered. She refused, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. I offered her a sum that would change her life. She looked at me with these incredibly perceptive eyes and asked, "Who sent you? Was it him?" The collector sighed. She said her art wasn't for sale to anyone trying to buy their way out of a guilty conscience. Then she started packing up her stall and left. The news was another blow. She was smarter, more intuitive than he had given her credit for. She could smell his influence, his money, a mile away. He had not only failed to help her, but he had also insulted her integrity, reinforcing her belief that he saw money as the solution to everything. Meanwhile, Imani was navigating her own private hell. The betrayal had hollowed her out, leaving an aching void where hope and a budding affection had once resided. The first day after the reveal, she didn't go to the park. She couldn't. The space was tainted, every corner of it a reminder of his deception. She stayed in her small apartment, the air thick with the smell of turpentine and linseed oil, a scent that usually brought her comfort, but now only amplified her solitude. She tried to paint, to channel the storm of emotions swirling inside her, but her hands felt clumsy, her vision clouded. She would stare at a blank canvas, her mind replaying every conversation, every shared smile, every moment of kindness from Manny. Had any of it been real? Or was it all a carefully constructed lie, a billionaire's bored pastime? The kindness he had shown her now felt like a calculated cruelty, a way to get close, to study her like a specimen in a lab. Her art, which had once been a source of vibrant, optimistic color, began to change. Her palette grew darker, her brushstrokes more aggressive, filled with a jagged, chaotic energy. She painted the city not as a place of hidden beauty, but as a labyrinth of shadows and false fronts, a reflection of the man who had so thoroughly deceived her. Her friends, noticing her withdrawal, tried to reach out. "What's wrong, Imani?" Her closest friend, a warm, bubbly woman named Keisha, asked over the phone. "You haven't been to the park in days." Imani couldn't bring herself to tell the whole, insane story. It sounded like a fantasy, a cruel fairy tale. "Just dealing with some stuff," she mumbled, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. She, who valued honesty above all else, was now building walls of her own. The irony was not lost on her. A week after the disastrous attempt with the art collector, Elias tried a different approach. He knew he couldn't approach her directly, so he sent Marcus. He thought perhaps a neutral third party, a calm and rational voice, could bridge the gap. He prepped Marcus for hours, telling him to emphasize his regret, his genuine feelings for her, his desire to apologize without any strings attached. Marcus found Imani back at her stall in the park. She looked thinner, her usual radiant energy dimmed, but there was a new, steely resolve in her eyes. He approached her cautiously, his demeanor respectful. "Ms. Imani," he began, "my name is Marcus Cole. I work with Elias Vance." Imani didn't even look up from her painting. I have nothing to say to him or to anyone who works for him. Please just hear me out, Marcus urged. He is devastated. He knows he made a terrible mistake. He never meant to hurt you. He was just lost. He wanted to find something real. Imani finally looked at him, her gaze piercing. And did he find it? She asked, her voice quiet but laced with ice. Did he get the data he needed for his little social experiment? Is he writing a report on it now? The effects of feigned poverty on the emotional responses of a struggling artist. Marcus was taken aback by her sharp, articulate pain. No, of course not. He fell in love with you. Imani let out a short, bitter laugh. Love? Mr. Cole, love doesn't start with a lie that fundamental. It doesn't involve watching someone you supposedly care about count her last few dollars to decide between paint and food. That's not love. It's a power trip. She turned her back to him, a clear dismissal. Please leave. Marcus returned to Elias with the grim news. She's built a fortress around herself, Elias, and you handed her every single stone. The failure of his second attempt sent Elias spiraling deeper. He was an architect of empires, a man who could bend markets to his will, but he was utterly incompetent in the architecture of the human heart. His wealth, his power, they were not tools. They were barriers, massive, impenetrable walls that he himself had erected between him and the one person he wanted to be close to. Just as Imani was trying to piece her life back together, a new complication arose, a serpent slithering into her fractured Eden. A man named Damien Croft began frequenting her stall. Damien was a prominent figure in the city's art scene, the owner of one of the most exclusive, commercially driven galleries downtown. He was a tall, slender man in his 40s, with skin the color of polished ebony, always dressed in impeccably tailored suits that seemed designed to intimidate. He had a predator's smile and eyes that didn't just look at her art. They appraised it, calculated its market value, stripped it of its soul. He had walked past her stall dozens of times before, never giving her more than a cursory, dismissive glance. But now, he was interested. Intensely so. The rumors of a billionaire's fascination with an unknown street artist had rippled through the city's elite circles, and Damien, ever the opportunist, smelled money. Imani, he said one afternoon, his voice a smooth, condescending purr, I've been watching your work. There's a certain raw, primal energy to it. It's marketable. He didn't speak of her talent, her vision, or the stories she told. He spoke of marketability, of units sold, of profit margins. He offered her a deal, a solo exhibition at his gallery. It was the kind of offer most struggling artists only dreamed of. It meant validation, exposure, financial security. It was everything she had been fighting for. But the offer came with conditions. He wanted to control the narrative, to market her as the ghetto prodigy, the diamond in the rough, discovered and polished by him. He wanted her to produce more work in the darker, angrier style she had recently adopted, claiming it was more authentic and would sell better. Imani was torn. On one hand, it was a lifeline. Her savings were dwindling, and the emotional turmoil of the past few weeks had made it difficult to sell even the smallest of her pieces. On the other hand, everything about Damien Croft felt wrong. He was the embodiment of the art world's cynical commercial heart, a world she had always sought to exist outside of. Accepting his offer felt like a betrayal of her own principles, a capitulation. And worse, she suspected his sudden interest was somehow tied to Elias. Was this another one of his attempts to fix her life from a distance? The thought made her stomach churn. She told him she needed time to think, a response that seemed to amuse him. Don't take too long, my dear, he'd said with a smirk. Opportunities like this are fleeting. The pressure was immense. Keisha urged her to take the deal. Imani, this is your chance. Who cares if the guy's a snake? Use him to get your foot in the door. Show them all what you can do. But Imani couldn't shake the feeling that she would be selling not just her paintings, but a piece of her soul. Back in his penthouse, Elias was unaware of Damien Croft, but he had finally reached a turning point. His failed attempts had taught him a painful but necessary lesson. He couldn't throw money at the problem. He couldn't send emissaries to fight his battles. He had to shed the skin of the billionaire and the disguise of the homeless man and approach her as simply Elias, the man. A flawed, remorseful man who had made a catastrophic error in judgment. He stopped trying to contact her. Instead, he started to learn about her, not by watching her from a distance, but by immersing himself in her world, the world of her art. He spent hours in the library and online, studying the local art scene, reading about independent galleries, artists' collectives, and non-profit organizations that supported emerging talent. He wasn't looking for a way to buy her success. He was looking for a way to understand her struggle, her passion, her values. He read interviews with artists she admired, learning about their journeys, their philosophies. He began to see the world through her eyes, a world where authenticity was the most valuable currency, where a single honest brushstroke was worth more than a mountain of gold. He realized that to help her, he had to honor her spirit, not just her talent. He couldn't give her a handout. He had to create an opportunity, a genuine one, that she could seize on her own terms, with her dignity and integrity intact. His research led him to a small, fiercely independent gallery in a revitalized warehouse district. It was called The Crucible. It was known for showcasing challenging, authentic work from underrepresented artists. It was run by a woman named Lena Washington, a revered figure in the art community, a woman known for her uncompromising eye and her passionate advocacy for artists. The Crucible didn't chase trends, it set them. An exhibition there was a mark of true artistic merit, not commercial viability. This, Elias realized, was the right path. It wasn't about him or his money. It was about her and her art. But how could he get her work in front of Lena Washington without his fingerprints being all over it? If Lena knew a billionaire was involved, she might be just as suspicious as Imani. The plan had to be subtle, elegant, and above all, anonymous. He formulated a new strategy, one that relied not on his wealth, but on his knowledge, his connections, and his ability to orchestrate events from the shadows. He discovered that the Crucible held an annual unseen talent competition. They accepted anonymous submissions, judged purely on the merit of the work. The winner received a grant and a solo exhibition. It was perfect. But he couldn't just submit her work for her. That would be another violation of her agency. He had to make sure she knew about the opportunity and was inspired to submit it herself, and he had to do it in a way that felt like serendipity, not manipulation. He bought a small, unassuming coffee shop, one that he knew Imani frequented for its cheap but good coffee. He did it through a series of shell corporations, ensuring his name was nowhere near it. He then hired a new manager, a young aspiring poet who he knew would appreciate Imani's art. He instructed the manager to start a community artist board, a place for local creatives to post flyers and announcements. Then he designed a simple, elegant flyer for the Crucible's unseen talent competition. The design was understated, focusing on the gallery's mission of artistic integrity. It spoke Imani's language. He had Marcus drop off a stack of the flyers at the coffee shop late one night. The stage was set. It was a long shot, a delicate, multi-step plan that could fail at any point. But it was an honest attempt. It wasn't about him buying her a solution. It was about him quietly opening a door and trusting her to have the strength and talent to walk through it herself. Forgiveness, he was learning, was not a transaction. It was a pilgrimage, and this was his first true step. A few days later, Imani sat in that very coffee shop, nursing a cup of tea, Damien Croft's contract sitting in her bag like a lead weight. Her mind was a battlefield. Take the deal, secure her future, but compromise her soul. Or refuse, maintain her integrity, but faced the very real possibility of having to give up on her dream. She felt trapped, a pawn in a game she didn't understand. Her gaze drifted over to the new community board, a splash of color against the cafe's worn brick wall. She saw flyers for poetry readings, band gigs, and then one caught her eye. It was the flyer for the Crucible. Unseen talent, your art, your voice, no compromises. The words seemed to leap off the page, speaking directly to the war raging inside her. The deadline for submission was in 2 days. She stared at the flyer, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in weeks igniting in her chest. A tiny, fragile spark of hope. It was a path, a different path, one that didn't require her to sell her soul to a man like Damian Croft. It was anonymous, based purely on merit. It was a chance to prove to herself and to the world that her art could stand on its own, without the shadow of a billionaire's pity or a predator's greed. She didn't know that the man who had broken her heart was the architect of this newfound hope. She didn't know he was watching from afar, holding his breath, praying that he had finally done something right. All she knew was that she had a choice, a real choice. She took the flyer, the paper cool against her trembling fingers, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a glimmer of her old self returning. The path forward was still uncertain, but for the first time since her world had been turned upside down, it felt like her own. The flyer for the Crucible felt like a small, paper-thin shield against the crushing weight of Damian Croft's contract. Imani sat in the coffee shop for what felt like hours, the world outside moving in a blur while her own was frozen on a knife's edge. In her bag, Damian's offer was a siren song, promising a future free from the gnawing anxiety of overdue bills and the fear of failure. It promised security, recognition, a name in lights, but she knew the lights would cast a long, dark shadow over her soul. He didn't want her art, he wanted her story, packaged and sold. He wanted to own her pain, to market her struggle, to turn her into a commodity. It was a lifeline, but it was also a leash. Across the table, the Crucible's flyer was a quiet whisper of defiance. Your art, your voice, no compromises. It offered no guarantees, no safety net, only a chance to be seen, not for a fabricated narrative, but for the truth she poured onto her canvases. It was a leap of faith into a vast, unforgiving unknown, while Damian's offer was a comfortable, well-appointed cage. The memory of Elias's deception was a constant, throbbing ache. He had shown her the danger of compromising truth, the poison of a beautiful lie. Could she now, in her first real test since his departure, commit the very same sin against herself? Could she sell a version of herself to the world, just as he had sold a version of himself to her? The answer came with a clarity that cut through the fog of her fear and indecision. No. She would rather fail with her integrity intact than succeed as a fraud. She ripped Damian Croft's contract into small, satisfying pieces and dropped them into the trash can on her way out of the coffee shop, a feeling of liberation washing over her. She was broke. She was scared, but she was free. That night, her small apartment was transformed into a sanctuary of creation. A new energy coursed through her, a focused, determined fire. She had to choose a single piece for the submission, a single canvas to represent the entirety of her being. She looked around at her recent work, the dark, angry canvases filled with the jagged edges of her betrayal. They were honest, yes, but they were not the whole story. They were a reaction to him, and she refused to let her future be defined by his lie. She then looked at her older work, vibrant and full of a hope that now felt painfully naive. That wasn't her anymore either. Her eyes finally landed on the painting she had finished the morning of the revelation. The city skyline at dawn, bathed in an ethereal, mystical light. The piece she had proudly shown to Manny. It was a bridge between her two worlds, created in the final moments of her innocence, but infused with a depth and wisdom that hinted at the storm to come. It held both her hope and her heartbreak within its layers of paint. It was the truest thing she had. With meticulous care, she photographed the painting, filled out the anonymous online submission form for the Crucible, and with a trembling finger clicked, "Send." She had cast her message in a bottle into the vast, indifferent ocean of the art world. Now all she could do was wait. In his penthouse, Elias was also waiting. It was a new and excruciating form of torture for a man accustomed to immediate results. He had set the dominoes in motion, but he had no control over how they would fall. He had to trust in the integrity of the process he had chosen, and, more importantly, in Imani's talent. Marcus found him one evening, staring at a blank tablet screen, his usual restless energy replaced by a quiet, gnawing anxiety. "Any news?" Marcus asked, knowing the answer. "The deadline for submissions was yesterday," Elias said, his voice tight. "Now, the judging begins." "You could find out, you know," Marcus offered, testing him. "A few calls, a donation to the gallery. You could know by morning if she even submitted." Elias looked at his friend, a flicker of the old, powerful CEO in his eyes, before it softened into something weary and new. "No," he said, shaking his head. "If I do that, then this was all for nothing. It becomes just another manipulation, another way of using my money to control the outcome. She has to do this on her own. I just opened a door. She has to be the one to walk through it." He was learning the hardest lesson of all. True support sometimes means letting go. The silence from Imani was a different kind of noise, a constant hum beneath the surface of his days, a reminder of all that hung in the balance. At the Crucible Gallery, Lena Washington, a woman whose commanding presence and sharp, intelligent eyes could make even the most arrogant artist tremble, presided over the judging. Her skin was the color of dark coffee, and she wore her silver-streaked hair in a crown of elegant braids. She and two other respected critics sat in a stark white room, surrounded by dozens of anonymously submitted digital images projected onto a large screen. The process was grueling, their standards exacting. They dismissed pieces with curt, incisive critiques. Derivative. Lacks conviction. All technique, no soul. Then Imani's painting filled the screen. A hush fell over the room, the skyline at dawn. It was a familiar subject, but her execution was anything but. Lena leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, studying the interplay of light and shadow, the bold yet tender use of color. "Well," she said, her voice a low rumble of intrigue. "This one has something to say." One of the other judges, a younger, more cynical critic, scoffed. "It's pretty. A bit sentimental, isn't it?" "You're mistaking sentimentality for sincerity," Lena countered, her gaze still locked on the image. "Look closer. Look at the tension in those brushstrokes. There's hope there, yes, but there's a deep melancholy, too. It's not just a sunrise. It's the light fighting back the darkness. This isn't a landscape. It's a confession." They debated for an hour, but Lena was resolute. The painting had a soul, a quality that could not be taught or faked. It was authentic. It was the winner. Imani was stretching a new canvas when her phone rang, an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something compelled her to answer. "Hello? Is this Imani?" a powerful, resonant voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "My name is Lena Washington. I'm the owner of the Crucible Gallery." Imani's heart stopped. She sank onto a nearby stool, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. Imani's heart stopped. She sank onto a nearby stool, her knuckles white as she gripped the phone. "I'm calling to congratulate you," Lena continued, a hint of a smile in her voice. "Your submission has been unanimously chosen as the winner of this year's Unseen Talent Award." Imani couldn't speak. A strangled sob escaped her lips. It was a sound of disbelief, of relief, of a pressure valve releasing after weeks of being tightened to the breaking point. Tears streamed down her face, tracing clean paths through the smudges of charcoal on her cheeks. I don't know what to say, she stammered. You don't have to say anything, Lena said warmly. Your painting said it all for you. Welcome to the Crucible, Imani. Your voice deserves to be heard. The news of the Crucible's award spread quickly through the art community. It was a significant honor, a sign that a major new talent had arrived. Imani's life was transformed overnight. She met with Lena, a woman she instantly admired and respected, and they began planning her solo exhibition. For the first time in her life, she had the resources and the space to create without compromise. The gallery provided her with a stipend, enough to live on and buy all the supplies she needed. It was a dream, a pure, untainted dream. The memory of Elias and his deceit began to recede, replaced by the thrilling, all-consuming work of preparing for her show. But the world Elias inhabited was small, and Damien Croft was one of its slithering creatures. Hearing that an unknown street artist had won the coveted Crucible Prize, and then learning it was Imani, the very artist he had tried to sign, sent him into a quiet fury. He had been publicly bested, and his ego was a fragile, venomous thing. He started digging. It didn't take him long, with his network of gossip and insiders, to connect the dots between Imani and the reclusive billionaire Elias Vance. He couldn't prove anything, but suspicion was a weapon he wielded with expert precision. A week before her exhibition was set to open, Damien appeared at the Crucible. The gallery was bustling with preparation, and Imani was on a ladder, carefully adjusting a light. She saw him enter, a sleek shark gliding into a coral reef, and her blood ran cold. Imani, he cooed, his smile as false as ever. Congratulations. A spectacular turn of events. Truly. What do you want, Damien? She asked, climbing down from the ladder, her posture defensive. Oh, just admiring the fruits of good fortune, he said, gesturing around the gallery. It's all quite remarkable. One moment you're a struggling artist who can't make rent. The next you're the talk of the town, discovered by the city's most virtuous gallery. It's a fairy tale. He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. It almost seems orchestrated. What are you trying to say? Imani asked, her voice dangerously low. I'm saying that Elias Vance is a man who is used to getting what he wants, Damien said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. He pulls strings. He moves mountains. Did you really think winning this was just a coincidence? He couldn't buy you, so he created the perfect integrity-laced cage for you instead, and you flew right in. The words struck her with the force of a physical blow. A cold dread, a familiar sickness began to creep up from the pit of her stomach. No, it couldn't be. This was hers. She had earned this. You're lying, she whispered, but the seed of doubt had been planted in the fertile ground of her previous betrayal. Am I? Damien shrugged, a picture of feigned innocence. Ask yourself, Imani, how likely is it, really? This is a beautiful setup. You get your dream, and he gets to soothe his conscience, playing the benevolent, anonymous benefactor. He's still pulling your strings, my dear. You just can't see the wires anymore. He gave her a final, pitying look and glided out of the gallery, leaving his poison to do its work. Imani stood frozen in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by her life's work, the triumphant evidence of her victory. But it all felt tainted now. The joy she had felt was curdling into a nauseating suspicion. Was Damien right? Was this just another, more elaborate performance? A gilded cage designed to look like freedom? Her dream, the one pure thing she had left, was now potentially another extension of his lie. The thought was unbearable. Her mind raced, replaying the sequence of events. Finding the flyer in the coffee shop she always went to, The perfect opportunity, appearing just when she was at her lowest point. The seamless, almost magical way her life had turned around. It did seem too good to be true. She needed to know. She found Lena in her office at the back of the gallery. "Lena," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Was there any outside influence in the competition? Any large, anonymous donations to the gallery right before it was announced? Anything at all that was out of the ordinary?" Lena looked up from her desk, her expression hardening at the implication. "Imani, I have built my entire career, the reputation of this gallery, on a foundation of absolute integrity. Are you questioning that?" "No, I mean, yes, I have to," Imani stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Lena, I need to know if the competition was clean." Seeing the raw panic on Imani's face, Lena's expression softened. She stood up and walked around her desk, placing a reassuring hand on Imani's shoulder. "I will tell you this once," she said, her voice firm but kind. "Every submission was judged blind. There were no names, only numbers. The panel's decision was based on one thing and one thing only, the power of the art. I have never, and will never, allow money or influence to corrupt that process. Your win was 100% legitimate. You earned it, and anyone who tells you otherwise is a damn fool or a liar." Lena's words were a comfort, a shield against Damien's poison. She was a woman whose word was bond, and yet the seed of doubt once planted had taken root. Elias was a master of manipulation. What if he had influenced things in a way even Lena wouldn't have known about? What if he had somehow stacked the deck, ensuring her work would be seen, ensuring it would be favored? Her joy was gone, replaced by a terrible, agonizing uncertainty. She couldn't live with it. She couldn't stand in the middle of her own exhibition on opening night, smiling for cameras, accepting congratulations, all the while wondering if it was all a lie. She had to know the truth, from the source. She couldn't build her future, even a brilliant one, on a foundation that might be cracked. She walked out of the gallery, leaving the half-hung paintings and the scent of fresh paint behind. Her mind was clear, her purpose set. The old Imani, the one who would have shrunk from confrontation, was gone. In her place was a woman who had been betrayed and had fought her way back, a woman who would not be played for a fool a second time. She walked through the bustling city streets, her stride long and confident. She was no longer just the struggling street artist. She was the winner of the Crucible Award, a woman with a voice, and she was about to use it. Elias, oblivious to the storm that was about to break, was in his office, looking at an article on a financial news site. It wasn't about stocks or mergers. It was from the culture section, a glowing review of the Crucible's upcoming exhibition for a stunning new talent. The article featured a picture of Imani standing proudly beside her winning painting. A genuine, unforced smile graced his lips. He had done it. He had helped her in the right way. He had opened a door, and she had soared through it on her own magnificent wings. He felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. He had finally done something right. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Vance," his assistant's voice said, sounding flustered. "There's a Miss Imani here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's very insistent." Elias's heart leaped into his throat. "Imani, here!" He stood up, his hands suddenly clammy. Was this it? Was she here to thank him? To forgive him? He smoothed down his tie, his mind racing. "Send her in," he said, his voice calmer than he felt. The door to his office opened, and she stepped inside. She was not the same woman he had last seen in the park. Her simple clothes were replaced by a stylish, self-assured dress. Her hair was elegantly styled. But it was her eyes that were the most changed. They were not filled with the heartbroken tears he remembered. They were blazing with an intensity that pinned him to the spot, a firestorm of suspicion, strength, and unwavering determination. She wasn't here to thank him. She was here for an entirely different reason. The quiet peace he had felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by the chilling realization that his carefully constructed plan had just led him to a new and perhaps even more dangerous day of reckoning. The heavy oak door of Elias's office clicked shut behind Imani, the sound echoing in the cavernous, silent space. The room was a monument to power. One wall was a sheet of glass offering a god's-eye view of the city, the very skyline she had just painted now laid out before him like a personal kingdom. The air was cool and still, smelling faintly of expensive leather and ambition. For a moment, she felt a flicker of the intimidation she was supposed to feel, the overwhelming sense of her own smallness in the face of his immense wealth. But then she remembered the grit of the sidewalk, the chill of a rainy afternoon under a shared umbrella, and the raw, unvarnished honesty she thought she had found in a man named Manny. That memory was her armor. Elias stood behind a desk so large it looked more like a landing strip, his hands resting on its polished surface. He looked every bit the billionaire she had seen in magazines, his suit perfectly tailored, his posture exuding a lifetime of command. But she could see the tremor in his hands, the uncertainty that flickered in his eyes. He had been expecting a different kind of meeting. "Imani," he began, his voice a low, hesitant murmur. I saw the article about your show. Congratulations. You deserve all of it." "Cut the congratulations, Elias," she said, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the opulent silence. She walked further into the room, stopping in the center, forcing him to look at her, not as a supplicant before a throne, but as an equal. "I have one question for you, and I want the truth. Not a performance, not a well-managed statement. The truth. Was the crucible my victory, or was it your design?" He flinched as if she had struck him. He opened his mouth, then closed it, a war raging behind his eyes. She saw the temptation to lie, to deny everything, to protect her from the very truth she was demanding. She saw the strategist in him calculating the odds, weighing the damage. "Don't!" she warned, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Don't you dare lie to me again!" He let out a long, shuddering breath, the sound of a man surrendering. He walked around the desk, closing the distance between them, stripping away the barrier of his power. "It wasn't a design," he said, his voice raw with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "It was a hope." "What does that mean?" she pressed, crossing her arms, her stance unyielding. "It means yes," he admitted, the words costing him dearly. "I was involved, but not in the way you think. I didn't pay anyone off. I didn't influence the judges. Lena Washington would have thrown me out of her gallery, and she would have been right to do so. My name is nowhere near the crucible." He paused, his gaze pleading. "I bought the coffee shop, Imani." The confession was so unexpected, so mundane, that it threw her off balance. "The coffee shop?" "Yes. And I hired the manager. I asked him to put up a community board, and I had the flyers for the Crucibles competition printed and left there, hoping you would see one." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure, nervous exhaustion that reminded her so much of Manny. "That's it. That's all I did. I opened a single anonymous door, Imani. I swear to you. The rest of it, the submission, the masterpiece you painted, the talent that blew them away, that was all you. I just made sure you saw the door." She stared at him, her mind reeling. He wasn't lying. She could feel the desperate sincerity radiating from him, but his confession, meant to reassure her, only ignited a fresh wave of anger. "You just made sure I saw the door?" she repeated, her voice rising with incredulous fury. "You are still doing it, Elias, still pulling the strings, playing God with my life. You think that's help? That's not help, that's control. You decided which door I should see, which path I should take. You don't trust me to even find my own opportunities." "No, that's not it," he insisted, taking a step closer. I trusted you completely. I was just trying to undo the damage I'd done. I wanted to give you an opportunity that my money couldn't taint, one that your integrity would allow you to accept. It was the only way I could think of to help you without insulting you. You want to help me? She shot back, her voice cracking. Then leave me alone. Let me succeed or fail on my own terms. My life is not a project for you to manage, not a wrong for you to right. My struggle was real. It was mine. You had no right to interfere, not even with good intentions. Her words hung in the air, heavy and damning. He looked utterly broken, his carefully constructed composure shattered. The powerful billionaire was gone, and in his place was just a man, exposed and wounded. "You're right," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "You're right. I'm sorry." He finally looked away from her, his gaze drifting towards the window, towards the sprawling city below. "I didn't do any of this because I thought you were weak," he said, his voice quiet, reflective. "I did it because I was. I was drowning, Imani. For years I've been living in this tower, surrounded by people who see a dollar sign when they look at me. My life was a series of transactions. I forgot what it felt like to have a real conversation, to share a moment that wasn't part of a negotiation. I was so starved for something authentic that I did something crazy. I became Manny." He turned back to her, and for the first time, she saw no strategy in his eyes, only a profound, aching loneliness. "And then I met you. And you were the most authentic person I had ever known. You had nothing, but you were richer than I could ever be. You had purpose. You had passion. You had a soul that you refused to sell. You didn't just see Manny, the homeless man. You saw me, the real me that had been buried for years. And I fell in love with you." He let out a humorless laugh. "And in my desperate, clumsy attempt to be worthy of that, I became the very thing I was trying to escape, a man who uses his power and money to control things. I wasn't playing God with your life, Imani. I was just a desperate man, terrified of losing the only real thing he'd ever found." The raw vulnerability of his confession disarmed her. The anger that had propelled her into his office began to dissipate, replaced by a complex wave of empathy and sorrow. She saw it then, the truth that lay beneath all the lies and manipulations. They were both trapped, she by her poverty, he by his wealth. Both were prisons, just with different walls. He had been just as desperate for a genuine connection as she had been for a genuine opportunity. The narrator's voice, a gentle, understanding presence, could have filled the silence. It was in this moment of shared vulnerability that the truth finally emerged. Redemption isn't about grand gestures or perfectly executed plans. It's about the terrifying, humbling act of showing someone your scars and trusting them not to turn away. It's not about fixing what is broken, but about having the courage to build something new out of the pieces. Imani finally spoke, her voice softer now, laced with a weary sadness. "I believe you, Elias," she said. And she did. "But I don't know what to do with that belief." She looked around the office at the symbols of his immense power. "This is your world. My world is a canvas and the smell of turpentine. I don't know how those two worlds can ever truly meet." "I would give all of this up," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Right now. I would walk out of here with nothing if it meant I could go back to that park bench and just sit with you." "We can't go back, Elias," she said gently. "That time is gone." She needed space. She needed to process this new, more complicated truth. "My exhibition opens tomorrow night. It's the most important night of my life. And it needs to be mine, completely." The unspoken request hung in the air between them. Don't be there. He understood immediately. The pain of it was visible on his face, but he nodded, accepting her terms. It was his final act of penance, to have helped her reach her dream only to be barred from witnessing it. "I understand," he said. "It's your night." She turned and walked towards the door, her heart a tangled mess of pain, empathy, and confusion. She paused with her hand on the handle. "Thank you for telling me the truth, Elias." Finally. And then she was gone. The night of the exhibition was a triumph. The Crucible was packed with collectors, critics, and art lovers, all buzzing with excitement. Imani, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, moved through the crowd in a daze. People praised her work with breathless superlatives. They saw the melancholy, the hope, the raw talent that Lena had seen. Her paintings, her children, were speaking to the world, and the world was listening. Keisha was by her side, beaming with pride, and Lena watched her with the quiet satisfaction of a mentor. Imani's gaze kept drifting to the door, a part of her illogically, foolishly hoping he would defy her wishes and show up. But he didn't. He had respected her boundary. He had let her have her moment, and in his absence, she felt his presence more strongly than ever. She knew he had heard her. He had finally, truly, seen her. As the evening wound down, Marcus Cole approached her through the thinning crowd. He looked out of place, his corporate suit a stark contrast to the bohemian crowd. "Imani," he said, his tone respectful, "Elias asked me to give you this." She tensed, expecting a check, another misguided attempt to throw money at their situation, but Marcus handed her a simple manila envelope. Cautiously, she opened it. Inside, there were no stacks of cash. There was a legal deed and a small handwritten note. The deed was for the coffee shop, transferred to her name, no strings attached. She read the note, her heart catching in her throat. "Imani," it said, "you were right. My world and your world are very different, but maybe we can build a bridge. This was never about me. It was about creating a space where a community could grow, where artists could connect, where a voice like yours could find its first spark. It's yours now. A tool, not a gift. Continue the work. You earned it all." Elias. Tears welled in her eyes. It was the perfect gesture. It wasn't charity. It was empowerment. It wasn't about him. It was about the community she cherished. It was a transfer of power, a final act of letting go. He had finally understood. Months passed. Imani's exhibition was a runaway success, launching her career into the stratosphere. But she didn't move into a fancy loft or lose herself in the commercial art world. She stayed in her small apartment, though she could now afford a bigger one. And she used the profits from her show to transform the coffee shop. It became the Crucible Cafe, a vibrant hub for local artists, with open mic nights, a free community board, and affordable studio space in the back. She had taken his tool and built a sanctuary. Elias changed, too. He didn't give up his company, but he restructured it, launching the largest philanthropic foundation for the arts the city had ever seen, one that focused on providing grants and resources to underserved communities. He was still a billionaire, but he was no longer a prisoner of his wealth. He spent less time in the boardroom and more time at the community centers his foundation supported, mentoring young entrepreneurs, his face filled with a purpose and contentment he had never known. He was learning to use his power not to control, but to empower. One sunny afternoon, Elias walked into the Crucible Cafe. The place was buzzing with the creative energy of poets, painters, and musicians. Imani was behind the counter, her hands dusted with flour, laughing with a customer. She looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded room. There was no drama, no soaring music, no grand reunion. There was only a quiet, profound recognition, a shared smile that held the weight of their entire story, the lies, the pain, the truth, and the forgiveness. He walked to the counter, no longer the billionaire Elias Vance or the homeless man Manny, but just Elias. "One coffee, please," he said, his voice gentle. "Coming right up," she replied, her smile reaching her eyes. The final moral of their story was not a simple platitude. It was a complex and beautiful truth. True love isn't about finding a perfect person or orchestrating a perfect fairy tale. It's about navigating the messy, imperfect reality of two flawed human beings. It's about the grueling work of earning back trust, the humility of seeking forgiveness, and the profound courage it takes not to go back to the beginning, but to build an honest new one, together. The path ahead was unwritten, but for the first time, they were both holding the pen.